DeLorean, step aside. There's a new hotshot car in town. Okay, maybe this station wagon from Pacific Drive isn't quite that badass. But after putting about 20 plus hours in exploring the different zones, collecting valuable resources to upgrade my station wagon, outrunning anomalies, and completing the main story, it's about time for my thoughts on Pacific Drive. Should you buy this game, wait for a deal, or skip completely? Well, in this episode of Nerd Space Games, I'm going to give you guys my brutally honest review of Pacific Drive. Let's get it.
Anytime now, Avi.
Ever wonder what it would be like if you were to take a driving simulator, add some horror elements, and then make it a survival game by replacing food and water with gas and battery power for your car? Well, if you did, then you're in luck because Pacific Drive allows you to live out that strange and very specific fantasy of yours. Pacific Drive takes everything you know about survival games and then applies it to your car. Instead of upgrading to different weapons and armor, you instead collect parts and blueprints to upgrade your fixer-upper. Instead of staying hydrated, you'll want to stockpile on gas reserves so that you don't find yourself stuck in the middle of a zone with anomalies fast approaching your position. Instead of keeping yourself fed, you'll need to collect jumper cables and find charging stations to keep your car battery charged. Essentially, it's impossible to survive out in the zones without your car, so keeping your car stocked with any resources that you'll need to keep exploring is vital. But why are you venturing out into the zones and risking your life to collect resources in an effort to upgrade your car? Well, that's where the story comes into play. After somehow finding yourself in a quarantine zone with supernatural dangers around each corner, your main mission is obviously to find a way out. After learning that your station wagon is known as a remnant and has some sort of supernatural defenses against the dangers of this world, you realize your only chance at escape is by upgrading your car and working alongside a few strangers to unravel the mystery around this remnant. Unfortunately though, the story is pretty dull and boring, so if you're expecting a fleshed out story that'll motivate you to complete the game, then I advise you to look somewhere else. What is exciting about this game though is the unique take on a survival game. As I mentioned earlier, Pacific Drive is essentially a driving simulator with survival mechanics. While the story may not be that interesting, exploring different zones for valuable resources to upgrade your car kind of is. You'll find yourself crafting new equipment to break down items in the wild for resources used to create new gadgets and tools. You can equip your station wagon with new devices and perks that'll help you withstand the dangers of the anomalies. Speaking of the dangers, what exactly motivates you to upgrade your car? As I said earlier, the zones scattered throughout Pacific Drive are filled with supernatural dangers, from energy balls that drain your car battery to the landscape changing in an effort to damage your station wagon. Each of these supernatural dangers are known as anomalies. As you progress the story, these anomalies become more aggressive and dangerous, which forces you to pull out every bit of driving skills you have at your disposal to survive. Sadly though, these anomalies don't really provide as much of a horror vibe as I was hoping. To be fair, the developers made it clear that Pacific Drive isn't a horror game, but rather a survival game with some horror elements in it. But considering that the story is boring and most of the zones feel vaguely familiar, I was kind of hoping for more of an atmospheric horror flair to help add some personality to the survival game, especially since technically Pacific Drive isn't an open world game. See, instead of being given a massive open world to explore with your handy dandy station wagon, Pacific Drive opts out for contained levels that you can travel to by using some sort of transport device. Considering that the main gameplay mechanic of this game is exploring the different zones with your car, the lack of an open world seems like a missed opportunity in my book, especially since exploring in my station wagon is one of the things that I love most about this game. Anyways, Pacific Drive is a somewhat difficult game, and it does a fantastic job at motivating the players to upgrade their car throughout the game. I find most survival games lacking in terms of motivating the player to upgrade their abilities and gadgets in order to complete the game, but Pacific Drive actually does this successfully. And straight up, my first 3 to 5 hours into the game was a lot of fun, to the point where I considered it being one of the better games of the year. Unfortunately, after the first 4 to 5 hours of the game, that excitement died down. Pacific Drive suffered from something that I find a lot of survival games suffering from, the fact that the game started to feel repetitive after a while. Since the story was pretty boring, the game relied heavily on its gameplay, and while the first few hours were a lot of fun, I found myself doing the same thing over and over again with no exciting changes. I go out, I collect resources, I upgrade my car, rinse and repeat. To make matters worse, the anomalies didn't really change up that much once you hit the midpoint of the game, and the landscapes all felt vaguely similar with minor changes to the area. So since things always looked the same and felt the same, after the first exciting hours of the game, it began feeling repetitive and boring, to the point where I had to force myself through the second half of the game to complete it. To be fair though, I've never been one for straight up survival games. For me to actually love and enjoy them, I need some sort of flair to keep me entertained throughout the entire game. And while the unique take on a survival game in the form of a station wagon was a nice touch, it wasn't enough to keep me invested all the way throughout the game. Considering that Pacific Drive is Ironwood Studios' first official game, I can't help but be impressed with what they did. Pacific Drive has a lot of features that had me excited, and it did a great job at motivating me to upgrade and fix up my fixer-upper station wagon. With so many innovative and revolutionary ideas for the survival genre, it's no wonder why so many people enjoy this game and why some content creators give this game high marks. However, the game fails to fix one of the biggest issues with most survival games: keeping itself from feeling repetitive, the lack of a good story to keep the players invested, the lack of any innovation behind making the zones feel different and unique from each other, and the lack of mission variety keeps me from enjoying the game after the first 4 to 5 hours. But I still think the game is slightly above average, so I give Pacific Drive a 6 out of 10. I think the rating for this game could easily change on how much you personally love the survival and upgrade mechanics of Pacific Drive. I know I'm probably the world's biggest hater on this game, as most reviews seem to be overwhelmingly positive on it. But again, for me, the game is slightly above average. Still, it's a fantastic start for an indie studio that's just getting started, and I'm honestly intrigued by what Ironwood Studios can bring us in the future. The team has the creative mind and the passion for sure. So if they can learn how to keep their game feeling fresh and exciting all the way through, then I'm willing to bet we'll see a legendary game from the studio in the future. Anyway, that's it for today's episode of Nerdspace Games. Have you played Pacific Drive? And if so, what rating would you give it? Do you agree with my score? Let me know down below. But as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerdspace Games. Take care.